Good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone here tonight for the Richmond Planning and Zoning meeting this Wednesday, August 16th. Clerk could call the roll.
Commissioner Shue,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles, Commissioner Short,
Here.
Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Perkins, Commissioner Estelle.
Here. Okay, I need for the approval of the July 24th, 2023 meetings. If everyone's had time enough to look over those, I'll get a motion on it.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes. I'll second.
Commissioner Shue,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles, Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle.
Yes. First on the agenda is the public hearing to discuss expansion of the H1 Historic District.
Okay. I believe we have some board members present tonight that intend to speak on the expansion that's been proposed. As an introduction, though, I'll just tell you what has happened. I know we've discussed this in the past, but the expansion or a new historical district by ordinance can only be proposed by the Board of Architectural Review, Planning Commission, or the City Commission. And a property owner may be able to apply for that as well. But this is actually an expansion in different areas of the current district that we have in place. And the members of the Board of Architectural Review determined that they would like to expand that. And so we did present that, or they presented that to the City Commission at a work session to float the idea essentially, and the City Commission was open to that and said continue with the process. So then we went back to the Board of Architectural Review. It requires, much like a zone change, essentially requires notification to the affected property owners. So that all took place, and we had a public hearing before the Board of Architectural Review. They voted to continue the process and move it forward, which then brings it before the Planning Commission, which you all can certainly ask questions, and we provided you with some information on number of properties affected and things like that, and they can certainly speak. And so then the next step would be for the Planning Commission to either approve or deny, and if you approve, then it would then move to the City Commission for another presentation and hearing, and then they would vote. But if you deny it, then it would stop at this stage.
Before we go any further, this is a public hearing, so after we hear each side of it, the public have a chance to speak on it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, last time I talked about this a little bit, about historic, but I gave you copies of the ordinance because I hadn't had any copies of it. And it's just 2 or 3 pages, but it provides for this. And it's also to, if you look at there, the purpose of the ordinance is protect, perpetuate, and encourage the non-destructive use of structures and districts designed as being substantially historic, cultural, and architectural importance within the city of Richmond. It's to increase pride and identify protected areas, basically, to some degree. So it's not just historic, it also has other things too. So the property does not have to be historic, but it can be to preserve neighborhoods, really. That's what it's really for. It's just an overlay to present here. There are certain restrictions. If you look down there first on some of this stuff, there are some restrictions. Okay, on page 143, there are some restrictions about what has to be done. The codes needs to monitor it. And if they have certain changes on the exterior of the house, they have to come and get a certificate, if I recall right.
That's correct.
So there is some work to be done, but again, if we want the neighborhoods not to all be kind of destroyed, then this is the first step. And if there's problems enforcing it as far as things go, then, and it's not a lot, then that can come to our attention too. We can go from there. Does anybody have anything to say?
So I think I was reading on here, you mentioned it too, so it would come under the codes if someone does not keep.
It doesn't change the zones at all. So if I've got an R1 in that area, or R3 or whatever, and it's a house, and it's displaced under R3, it's still an R3 or an R1.
That's
whatever
correct.
the code is now, the zone is now. This is just what this says.
It's kind
an
of a
overlay.
secondary zoning.
Exactly.
An umbrella over top of what's already existing.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It doesn't change that a bit.
Gotcha.
The only thing it changes is the things for the external part of the house, like certain colors and things like that, windows, doors, light fixtures, things like that, that have to be maintained in a more historic way, et cetera. Mr. Goss is far better at this than I am. If he wanted to speak for a minute about what it implies,
Yes, sir.
because I want everybody to, or Brandon too, yeah.
Brandon.
Oh, yes.
Both of you, yeah.
Well, esteemed commissioners, I am Brandon Powell. I'm the chairman of the Board of Architectural Review, and I have with me Ronald Gossas, who's also a part of our board, and he has done this in many places in other towns around the country and been involved in a lot of historic preservation work. So to simply show what we've done here is, if you look to the upper left of the screen, the green line denotes what is basically the West Richmond National Register District that is not currently in our H1 overlay. The current H1 overlay is the red line that you see there. There's a couple little rectangular bumps at the north side of the red. That is part of the Courthouse National Register District. So we have two National Register districts in our city that are not in our H1. We felt very strongly that those areas should be included in our H1, and that's really the main emphasis of why we wanted to do this. But we also wanted to include to the right and sort of the bottom edge, the green that's shown there. Those additions would be overlaid, would match the entertainment district that's been recently defined in the city. We wanted to include those because they are also critical to downtown, and they contribute, those areas could contribute, greatly to the look and feel of downtown, and we felt like it was important to include them. I'll quickly say that our guidelines are written exactly for these types of neighborhoods and this type of downtown environment. So I wouldn't see us expanding this district anymore, because we really wanted to include the National Register districts and the entertainment district, because the entertainment district is looking to do a lot of new, what I would say, well, it's called new urbanism, but it's really just good urbanism strategy. And our guidelines have those strategies cooked into the cake already. So we would just be a way to help encourage good urbanism, not only in the downtown proper, but also downtown neighborhoods that are historic in nature. So, Ronald, would you like to say some more?
Well, I think what they're going to address is, if I had a home down in this new area, or you did, say, what is it going to require me to do and what it can't do from you two? Because I think that's...
So our main mechanism of, I guess, enforcement, you want to call it, is called a certificate of appropriateness. We review projects based on whether or not they would be appropriate for the district. And so that just amounts to a citizen coming in, providing some images or drawings, renderings of what they're proposing, and then we simply make a judgment as to, with our guidelines kind of in consideration, we make a judgment to that effect and write them as a certificate of appropriateness. Now they're ready to go and do whatever else they need to do, meeting codes and other things. So,
Well, do I have to get approval to change the door color? Do I have to get approval to change the landscaping?
it's in our guidelines. It's all spelled out what you would need to, if there are things that, what you can and can't change. So basically, if someone wants to do something to this building across the street, say they want to use the same color scheme, just paint it for maintenance. They want to do other things for maintenance, fix a broken window. Maintenance does not, they don't have to come to us. They're not changing. They're not changing color, they're not changing the look or the function of the building. And further, we only deal with what is seen from the main street.
Front
So,
facade,
so yes, the front, how it fronts the neighborhood, what it contributes to the neighborhood. So if a person in, say, one of the residential areas wanted to do something in their backyard or to their back, add a porch or something on the back, can't see it from Main Street, we don't need to see it. So
Okay.
now they will still have to deal with codes and whoever they need for safety and those kinds of things. But they would not need to see us. So all that's defined in our guidelines, and I think even partly in the ordinance, because I think the ordinance stresses the importance of the neighborhood. So, but it's definitely in our guidelines that any
When you
work done
say-
in the
When you
back.
say guidelines, it's this thing here.
Yeah, I think that's it, yes.
Richmond guidelines, yeah, it's very good, actually.
So that upper part in the green, that's like West Main out in that area?
That's West Main extending down to Norwood. It captures, I can't remember the name, do you remember the name of that property? The one that kind of goes deep, far back into the, no, it's not Elmwood, but there's a historic home there that's, you would recognize it as historic. It's,
Okay,
you get pretty close to Arlington. Is that correct?
just at the edge of Norwood. That's pretty much it. Arlington's another few blocks away.
My question is, in an area like that, and some of the homes or whatever is not up to standard now,
We can't do anything about that. If they,
so I guess what I'm saying, if I live here and my house is historic and I've done all that I do, and then I've got one next to me that's in that same area and they haven't done anything to bring it up to what you all are talking about doing.
well, honestly, the only recourse is for the city to condemn a property. When there's dilapidation occurring or demolition by neglect, right now, there's no good mechanism to put a property owner on notice,
So it'd be just like,
aside from ordinances that are already on the book.
so that's why I was going to, it'd be no difference what they've got now on the codes.
Right,
as far-
we're only there to really assist homeowners that are interested in preserving their property and want to do the right thing.
Well, and the reason I brought that up, I think it's when I first come on here, it's been years ago. There was a gentleman that was in that situation, and he said, I don't want to be a part of it. For the simple fact, the place next to him, that they weren't doing anything, nothing has been made for him to correct. So he said, what's the use of me bringing mine up to standards? And here's one right here, just, I mean, he's just doing what he wants to do with it.
And we don't really even set a standard. We just have guidelines that if somebody wants to change the appearance of their home, say repaint it or change the front look, then we offer, based on our guidelines, that's when we step in and say whether it's appropriate or not.
Isn't,
Yeah, but what it was, I mean, these people didn't do anything, I mean, they didn't bring theirs up. They wasn't making any change to it.
Well, you know, if someone is, so they're just not doing anything.
They
They're
weren't
not
doing
maintaining
anything.
their home.
Yeah, I mean, he was bringing, you know, he was keeping his up and doing, and
Right
he
now
was
there's-
disgusted over that for the fact that.
Exactly, and right
that I'm
now
doing,
there's,
and these people here, it's nothing been,
yeah.
you know, for them
wouldn't
to do
codes
it.
come into this?
Huh?
Wouldn't codes come
There
into
are
this?
ordinances on the books that,
Right. And to me, the whole
can be.
purpose of doing this historic, expanding is to protect the homes that are not being kept up to standard.
yes.
Or
So,
at least sets a standard for them to follow.
right.
I think that's the big thing,
Yeah.
people really have to want to be in it, they want to be active into it. You can't force them, I don't think, to do anything they really don't want to do.
Let me ask you, do we have a problem with people not wanting to be in the historic district?
Not wanting to what?
We do have some that don't want to be. Well, let me ask you this also, and then I'll leave y'all. I'll stop talking. But is there not a way to, with taxes, property tax, to make it beneficial to own a home in the historic district?
That's above my pay grade. I would think
Right,
there are
but-
mechanisms that could be employed to encourage this kind of activity,
But
but
I think
honestly,
that
we don't
would-
have it.
Yeah, because if you have an old historic home, first of all, your plumbing's not up, your electrical's not up to code, your insulation is not, so your heating costs are exorbitant, can be exorbitant. So you need to put a lot of money into a home to maintain it, and we want it maintained. So to me, it would be a very nice thing if the city would encourage people to, hey, I want a historic home because I can save, if we give them half off their property tax. I know they give them historic district, you can get loans, but that's doesn't, but I think if you take some property tax off, that might be an incentive.
I think that's a fabulous idea.
I think your biggest
That's
thing
actually a
is,
good idea.
your biggest thing is really, we're trying to maintain the front facade.
Right.
And it's kind of like a western town in a movie.
Yeah.
And that's really what it all boils down to.
Right.
It may be falling down behind the front walls, but when you drive through the town, it's like going through Danville and places like that. You drive through there and these beautiful homes and think, this is beautiful. They may be falling down in the backyard. I don't know.
I
And we
When
don't
you
want
drive through
that,
there,
though.
it strikes you. And it's like, why can't we do that?
Let me-
We have it
Let me
there.
clarify one thing. This property I'm talking about, it wasn't falling down. It wasn't to the point where it needed to be demolished. It was just to the point to where he wasn't, or the person wasn't going to go out here and put $500 shrubs or something in. He might be going out here Walmart somewhere and get shrubs in. But that's what I'm talking about. I mean, like you're talking about, it's going to be a certain type of landscaping. Is that what you're talking about?
Not so
No,
much
structure of the
landscaping.
building.
Or the structure?
Structure
Yeah.
and maybe there's some, if you do the fence, we talk about fencing you can use, but you don't have to do a fence.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, I'm not saying that this person didn't do it, but he just wasn't gonna put that much money, expense into it. And some people was upset, well, I'm doing it, he ought to bring his up to.
Well, I think what Ronald may speak to and what you may be alluding to is if there's an advantage to being in the historic district, then people are incentivized to
Right.
want to do it the right way, but I think we gotta get the homes in the district first,
Sure,
especially if
certainly.
they're a national register district, and that's what's critical, but I'll let him speak to it.
There is some tax advantages through the state of Kentucky if you're in a historic area. Number two, if the building itself is individually listed, and I think a few of them are. Yeah, some of them are. Those you can go through the National Trust of Historic Preservation, national organization, which is even better and has more money available. So those advantages, those are great advantages.
So this is kind of a first stage if you want to do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And let me tell you something. The National Register is pretty good about determining, like some structures are deemed like primary or highly important, and others are deemed secondary or to the neighborhood, but important because they're part of the neighborhood. So we would take that into consideration when we're looking at someone who wants to do something to their home. If they're not a primary structure, we're not going to try to hold them to the Queen Anne mansion next door. I mean, that's just ridiculous. We wouldn't do that. So like Amberley would be one of the primary structures within the district, whereas across the street, there's, lovely smaller homes that aren't considered primary, but they front Amberley or they're in the neighborhood, so we want them to be at least well-maintained, and if they do change the look, then it needs to be appropriate to the neighborhood. So that's really why we want to protect the entirety of the national districts.
And this overlay has been used across the nation. My wife and I first started this back in the 70s. We worked with the National Trust, and at the time we lived in Ohio and through the Ohio Historical Society. And after the ordinance was written, it has been picked up across the nation. So it's basically the same thing over and over again. So It basically just protects, everything's grandfathered in. Another big thing is let's say you have your house and your next door neighbor wants to paint their house purple. Well, that's not going to make everything look very good. They can't do that. So, but they can paint it if it was beige or if it was whatever color, they can repaint. It's all grandfathered in. So that's the beauty of it. And the beauty that there is funding if you start looking for it. I mean, it doesn't just pop up to you. You have to work on it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Come up and give your name, please.
Hi, my name's Lynette Noblet, and I live at 316 South 3rd Street, which I understand is part of the addition that would be one of the houses that would be added in this historic district. I'm also the chair of the Department of Government, and as such, at Eastern Kentucky University, and as such, I was the building supervisor for the Beckham building on campus until just a few months ago. I have some concerns about zoning the houses that are on my block historic for a few reasons. One of the things that I found as building supervisor for the Beckham building at EKU, the Beckham building is on the Bluegrass Historic Trust. It's a very attractive building. It was an honor to get to work in that building, and it is lovely, but I will tell you it has some really serious problems, and because of its historic zoning, we've really been priced out of fixing them. It has internal copper gutters, excuse me. It has internal copper gutters. And unfortunately, over time, those internal copper gutters at the Beckham building have collapsed and corroded. And what we really need to do to fix the building and in any sort of way which would be financially feasible for a public institution would be to have external gutters. But because the building is zoned historic, we cannot do that. So right now we sit at EKU with a building that has collapsed, corroded gutters, and we literally have the plaster crew in the building every single summer fixing all the corroded walls that are by their very nature happen because we don't have appropriate gutters or appropriate roofing on that building. And unfortunately, because of its historic zoning, we can't really look at alternative ways to more cost-effectively deal with those drainage issues, and the building is suffering. And at one point in time, we actually had to evacuate the building. The mold counts were so high there. It continues to be a health hazard off and on. And so I have, I love old buildings. I love old architecture. I love nothing more than for downtown Richmond to have a rebirth. My husband and I have lived there 18 years now. We believe in downtown Richmond and want it to do great things. We border Irvin McDowell Park and support everything that park does. But I have some concerns, especially because I know my neighbors. They don't have a lot of money. We recently had several buildings that were re-roofed. And I was thrilled when that happened because new roofs mean that the buildings won't collapse and fall down, right? But they weren't historic roofs. They weren't even shingle roofs. They did some of those like metal siding roofs, which I'm fine with, but not historic, perhaps not appropriate or in line with. I also struggle to see my neighborhood as historic. My home is of no historic value that I know. I like it a lot. It's old. But I'm not sure it necessarily is of any sort of historic importance to Madison County. I will speak specifically to my next door neighbors right now who are wanting to be able to repaint their home. It's an older home they just purchased for their son. They have had such a rough time. They thought they could just strip the paint. It turns out the paint was lead. They were responsible and had it tested, so they couldn't scrape it. They then tried to use all sorts of these supposedly safe chemical peelants. They couldn't do that. They then tried to use a sealer and put some paint on it, and for now that's what we're dealing with. But they admit it's ugly. It probably needs vinyl siding. Vinyl siding might not be historically appropriate, I don't know. But it certainly will change the outside of the building. Otherwise, really, it's these are little low-cost homes. It's not worth putting the kind of genuine restoration money that you'd need to fix again a very modest home bought for some young boys to live in. I also have some concerns both, when I got the letter, I was kind of shocked, like, oh, maybe it's a mistake, because I just don't consider the neighborhood to be historic. Many of the houses have already been significantly changed. Like, my house has vinyl siding over it. I bought it that way, but it's my understanding that underneath my vinyl siding are some pretty rundown shingles that had asbestos in them, so it was decided by 2 owners before me to just slap vinyl siding on it. I think there are other people in the neighborhood that probably want to look for perhaps lower cost ways to be able to renovate and keep up homes that, if you go to South 3rd Street, there's some homes that really could use some renovation, and we don't need to raise the cost on them. They're not getting done as it is. I also would wonder, I assume all the renovations that I've already put into my home, because like the front porch of my house, like I've made several external changes over the years. Like, I don't even know what would be historic anymore. It looks very different than what it would have when it was built, so.
Okay.
Those are my major concerns. I do fear we will price people out of being able to renovate homes. Now, if there are massive tax benefits or pools of money that are efficient and effective, to get to homeowners, that I think alleviates my concern. But that is something that I think we don't zone something and then say, oh, we'll figure it out in the mix. Because in the meanwhile, people can't fix their homes. And mine needs a new roof soon. It's not leaking yet, and it survived that last hailstorm somehow. But I know a couple homes on the block that are all sort of, it's just a matter of time. And raising the costs on that could instead either force people to sell their homes or live in, conditions that will deteriorate them. Thank you.
Thank you. That's always been my concern when you go into you make it a historic district, and sometimes they will make it difficult to improve a structure, and sometimes more modern applications are better. Like you were talking flat roof versus a gabled roof, and perhaps the architectural board doesn't have to be so stringent on this is the way it has to be. I don't know how much leeway they would have with a historical
I
site.
think that's part of it. It's like, she was talking about the type guttering system. I realize what she's talking about. It's an old antiquated type guttering.
Yeah, it shouldn't
And
be there.
it doesn't work,
Right.
over the long term, but, you have to have, you have to have a little common sense figured in. If it doesn't work, if you have to put gutters on it to save the building.
save the
You
building,
put
yeah.
gutters on it, just do it, do a nice job. There will be common sense. It has to
think
be
so.
some way or another.
Right.
And,
Right.
but, she brings up other things too, as far as, their asbestos abatement. I realize that is a
Very
huge
expensive.
thing. Some people can't afford that. There's corporations that have a hard time, dealing with that.
Sure.
So I understand there's been a lot of these things, but that's more of a public health thing, but.
Well, I think when you get into homes like that and you start tearing into them, you really don't, things are being covered up, you really don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
On that, and it can be costly
Yes.
if you're trying to put it back the way it is.
I think, yeah.
Scott Collins. I own a property, West Main and Norwood, so I'm in the green area, West Main, that would be added. I also own jointly with Dr. Fred Bramall another one that's going to be added here at the foot of Madison Middle, an 1826 build. Vastly different, but both of them are on the National Register, not in the H1 overlay. I'm for us making moves forward like this. What matters to me most, however, is that we cooperate in doing it, the municipality with the homeowners. And I think each of you brought up really important points. I'll try to pull these together, but number one, when we're talking about the advantages, tax advantages, you can get both Kentucky state money and you can get federal money, but the way you get those tax credits is you propose your work a year in advance. April is the deadline for next year's money. You have to prove to whether it's the state registry that you're on or the federal, that the improvements are consistent. So let's talk about box gutters. I cannot get federal money to improve my house if I change from box gutters to external gutters. So when we talk about advantages like this, sure, there are tax advantages, but the standard is not the standard that we're talking about in this proposal. And so it's really talking out of both sides of my mouth. There is no tax advantage unless I'm willing to do box gutters, and I know what those are. That's $100,000 to $150,000 for the types of homes that are here in Richmond. It's just not cost effective. So kind of going, I don't know if it was Dr. Miller or Mr. Estelle, which of you said, this is kind of aimed at those that are already fully bought into historic preservation. It's not really helping the eyesores out there. They couldn't care less. So in my mind, what I would like for the commission to entertain is, yes, this is a good direction to go in, but we need a better comprehensive plan so that what the Architectural Review Board is proposing does a couple of things. Number one, I think the city needs to help provide a benefit to the homeowner. If you want us to jump through a higher hoop, another hoop, 2 levels of certificate of appropriateness plus zoning compliance, whatever, then what do we get in return? Well, is there a tax credit? And maybe, sure, everybody wants a tax break, but it is a good idea to entertain, and it seems to me we're not having all of those people come to this decision-making process just yet. Another thing that we mentioned at the public meeting with the Architectural Review Board is that someone is appointed in the city to help those of us that are in the National Registry. This gets a little technical here, but all of the H2 that's being added to H1 were added in mass. So my property, which I think all of you know which one we're talking about, it's not a nothing property. It's a pretty significant property, but it does not have individual status. And the process for me to get it listed individually is very difficult, especially if I'm already on the generic full H2. I have to now prove why it should be granted that higher level. Does it stand on its own as historically significant? Well, if we had somebody at the city level that was advocating for us to help us, sure, I like being on your H1 expansion if you've got a liaison that'll help me get the National Registry on my side too. So we could come up with a more comprehensive approach where the city's helping the individuals. Another thing I'd like for you to consider in that is, while what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I know, Brandon, you've been doing this for a long time. You have best of intentions here, but what I do hear us saying is, all we're going to do is tell you about the color. That's not what the document says. The document says that you can scrutinize my mortar, that I have to, and it's an undefined standard, I have to get it back to what is appropriate for, and then this is the moving target. If it's the house across the street that's already been destroyed and it's an empty lot and they want to put a new home on it, is it a 1940s Kentucky style bungalow that they can build? Or do they have to do an 1880s style Queen Anne Victorian? What is the standard? And we have to make that known to the public before somebody comes in, buys a piece of property and now says, oh, there's all this other stuff and I didn't know what I was getting into. I think that's just not good public policy, if that's making sense to you. So I'm not against it. I just think we can do a better job putting this plan out there that helps both sides. I do think that one other thing to entertain is, if you're talking about this standard to which one has to renovate and have the certificate of appropriateness, that whole issue, as I'm glad the city's coming to embrace and support historic preservation, what historic era of Richmond are we seeking to add and enhance? Because as you said, we're going through Danville, or you're going through Georgetown, you see a consistent era that is presented in the architectural style. We don't have that here. And I do think that the Architectural Review Board, along with the City Commission could, or not City Commission, Zoning Commission, could say, this is what we're looking for. This is what we want represented in Richmond, whether it's 1880 or 1940, so that we have something where we come together, we have a common vision. It would just, it seems to me, however, at this point, our plan is more of a punitive, let's try to take care of people who are not, instead of providing incentives so that more people will want to. Because I do want my next door neighbor to invest and bring theirs up to speed. That helps my property value more than anything else we could possibly do if we've got a lot of people who care about their homes. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for entertaining.
Thank you. Someone else?
I was just going to mention the standard for a building on the National Register in terms of qualifying for tax credits or things of that nature. Yes, it is different because it has to respond to National Register design guidelines. Our guidelines are not that strict. We're more interested in just the front street appearance, like the internal gutters that were mentioned. That wouldn't be an issue because they're on the inside. So to us, if you had a internal gutter that was, or a downspout that was inside the building in copper and rotting out and you want to replace it with PVC, we don't see it. It protects the building. We're interested in protecting the buildings. If you want to put, I don't believe in our guidelines that metal roofs are excluded. Metal roofing with the appropriate color is allowed in the district. Vinyl siding, if it's already there, we accept it. If it's encapsulating something that's hazardous, like asbestos or lead paint, sure, we're open to the homeowner keeping that in place. We don't want to be a safety hazard to anybody. If you were considering replacing that material, then we would try to offer guidance to maybe consider, a cementitious board or something or a wooden board that's going to be longer lasting, accept paint well, have, crisp edges, those things of that nature. But again, that would only have to be on the visible part of the house. If you wanted to keep the vinyl on the sides or the back, that's entirely up to the homeowner. We're not looking to try to price people out of renovating homes. We're just trying to get them to protect the homes and just to maintain the neighborhoods. And I think the example of trying to protect one particular consistent era is not correct, because if you drive down Danville, you're going to see Federal style and you're going to see Gothic style, Gothic revival. You're going to see Queen Anne's and Craftsman's and all up and down, Maple Street, some of the other streets. There's all kinds of different styles in there. It doesn't take away from the neighborhood that there's different types of architecture. So, again, I want to just revisit that I think if it's a national registry neighborhood, it's important enough on the national level that I think we should be having it in our H1. Though I just want to touch on those points. And again, if anybody has dealt with our board, you know that we try to be as accommodating as possible. We understand budgets are a reality. We're going to try to get the best solution for the people that come to see us, considering what they're up against. We understand fully that these are difficult things to accomplish, and owning any home is tough to maintain, much less one that's in a nice neighborhood or a historic neighborhood. And that's the other thing. A historic neighborhood does not necessarily mean that every home in that neighborhood is a historic structure, but it does mean that it contributes to the neighborhood, and it should be not present at least a presentable face to the neighborhood. So that's why we're asking for what we're asking.
Brandon, just before you leave, Brandon, or maybe both of you, how do you handle a building that's already been kind of heavily modified? In the sense, let's just say, for instance, you had an old church, and the church was built in the 1800s, and, you know, it had the bell tower, and it was, you know, it's basically right here, close. And basically, back in the 20s, they decided, okay, the church is now going to move to a new location, so they remove the bell tower. They take off the bell tower, and then they add to it, they add other pieces, other additional buildings to that. And so now you're now forward to the 2023, and you're left with a particular building. How do you hold that building to a standard?
We don't. We take it for what it is, and then if they want to modify it further or change the color, we take it for what they present. We can't say, oh, well, you're going to touch the building, you got to put the bell tower back on, and you got to put it back on like it was in the 20s. We can't do that. We're not going to do that.
Right.
We're just going to try to keep it. Our goal is to address, number one, we're just happy if somebody's going to be there to maintain the place and use it, because that's priority one, is get people using these neighborhoods. The next part is to try to make them handsome enough to be pride for the city.
Gotcha.
Who doesn't want to drive down West Main and be proud of what they see? Just like people say, oh, Danville's so wonderful, or Georgetown, or Winchester's done a lot for their downtown. And I think that's really all we're trying to do. We want to just present a nice face for our tourism building just moved into the district we'd like to expand. And they are pretty much the front door to downtown and our town now. So that's the front porch for our city, for tourists. So I just think it's critical, but I'll leave it to you all.
I'd like to address one thing that you spoke from EKU. EKU has never come to us in reference to, and I think you're talking about the building on Lancaster Avenue? No, okay. 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 It's like- And like Brandon said, that's not a problem. I know there's a problem with the one on Lancaster Avenue. Okay, and at the time, I found out from word of mouth, they wanted to tear that down. So I called the National Trust in Washington, and National Trust in Washington called the president of the university at that time and says, you cannot do that. We can stop all funding to the state of Kentucky. So that's why at one time it was put up for sale.
Oh, that's what they
So, and I guess they didn't sell it.
Cool.
So anyway, but I think what Brandon said is the same thing. We're not here to tell you have to have a certain gutter. I mean, if you need to change something, everyone's very, very easy with it. They have to reside the house, redo the exterior, and Diamond will tell you what's the best interest to those people. So we're not here to make things hard. We're here to help people, and that's basically what the historic ordinance will do.
Can I ask you a question? The homes that Eastern owns that are in the historic district, we have no control over that?
None whatsoever.
Can the city approach Eastern about selling them, some of these homes that are becoming
I
derelict?
believe at one time the city manager and the mayor went to the president of the university, not the one now, but the other one, a past president, and said, you know, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? How it ended, I don't know. But there are some buildings that have been vacant for a year.
So that's something we need to talk to the mayor about, because I think Eastern has some money problems right now too.
Yes.
And it might
There's
behoove
one-
them to sell some of these.
Right, and why they don't sell it, I don't know. I mean, it's fairly easy to.
And the way I understand it is they can't tear them down.
No, only if it's individually listed in the National Register. There's one in Lancaster on the corner, close to Oak Street. That is just within the historic district. That can be, if they want to tear it down, they can tear it down.
Yeah, but some of them they can't, I like it.
Yes.
Well, thanks for saving that one building. Good job.
Is there anyone else? Anyone on the commission got anything else?
I would say that if we do make a motion to approve it, that do you think it's too much to ask that we recommend some kind of benefits for the historic area?
Through the city?
For the city, yeah.
Property tax.
Property tax
It's the only way
credits.
to do it. If they have to go through all these hoops, I think,
Is that possible, Tyler?
Well, it's certainly possible for you to recommend that it be looked at by the city commission, but here you don't have authority to recommend only if. I mean, we're looking at, this is expanding the tax credits. However, expanding the historic district, that's what's before you. You could make any recommendation you want to the city commission, whether they take that up or not.
I would ask to not do that.
Not do that?
Just because I would like to have a
Just go
yes,
through.
and let's move on. And then I think that discussion should be encouraged later on, but I wouldn't want to tie anything else to trying to expand the district. I think that's a pretty tough ask already. So that's just my thought. So, thank you.
Sure, that's a good suggestion. Okay, I make a motion that we, if there's nobody else, that we approve the expansion of the H1 Historic District.
I second.
Commissioner Shu? Yes. Commissioner Miles? Yes. Commissioner Short?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
No.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the zone map amendment for Begley Properties LLC, property located at 371 82nd Drive, current zone UC7, proposed zone AG.
Oh, it's going to be down.
I'll actually discuss that one. Is everybody familiar where this property is located?
Is that part of that 600 acres?
It's technically part of the 600 acres that the city has an option on. This portion of that property is still located within the county. So this is out past Bucky's, out in that area behind that. So the hope is that the city attracts some type of large industry out there. So this is really more of a housekeeping measure, but it is a voluntary annexation, so that the intent to annex has made it through the city commission. We're now here as usual process to assign the zone. And currently, whether it's unknown what may happen with the property, the recommendation or the request is to zone it agriculture, which, as you know, is essentially the holding place when you annex something in. If there's no development plan, the property is usually zoned agriculture, and then we hold it there. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they can go out and raise cattle or do extensive farming. I'll just put it that way. So that's the request, and that's the justification.
Does any commissioners have anything to say? Tyler? Okay, may I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion and we approve the zone map amendment for Begley Properties LLC, property located at 371 82nd Drive, current zone UC7, proposed zone AG, Ag.
A second.
Are we good? Okay. Commissioner Shu?
Yes.
Commissioner Miles? Yes. Commissioner Short?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is the major amendment to the planned unit development known as the Farms at Barnes Mill to change the phasing plan.
Me? Time to go? Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Brad Boaz with CMW Architects and Engineers, and I'm here again to talk to you guys about the Farms at Barnes Mill project at the corner of Goggins Lane and Barnes Mill. I came earlier this spring, I think it was, to talk about our phasing plan and some of the interesting details of the PUD language in the ordinance and how we have a certain amount of time to fulfill our phase one construction obligation. And you all graciously approved a reduction. And so we've been out, I don't know if you've been out to the site or driven by it, but there's obviously a ton of work going on with the school and our road system that's going in. Our first large detention basin is done. Cattleman's Loop, which runs along the school project, is virtually on subgrade. Storm drainage is in, and they should start pouring curbs fairly soon. And so we're kind of moving right along, and we had a potential developer come in and really kind of hone in on the piece of property that fronts on Goggins between our two main arteries that come in off of Goggins. And so there you go, thank you. So where it says phase two on the screen, there's a 11.5 acre commercial, and then closer to Goggins, there's a 6 acre of agriculture and then a couple acres of commercial. And the road that goes between those is what we call Vermeer Way that parallels Goggins, and that's within our new phase one that we actually have under contract to be built. However, we are entertaining a developer that would like to take that entire area and turn it into a commercial development. And normally that, I don't think that would cause a lot of angst on our side, because it's a good thing that we're getting, national developers coming in, except that Vermeer Way is supposed to be built by April of next year for us to lock in our PUD zoning so we can move forward with all the rest of the project. And so when this came about, we were trying to figure out, how quickly could we get a new plan in front of you guys to say, all right, we've got our next real project coming online. We want to manipulate Vermeer Way and how it functions so that this developer, and I have to, let me interject, I'm sorry for being very vague. We've, dealing with national developers, we're all under NDAs and we can't say anything, and it's very hush-hush and it's very annoying because I'd like to show you all a beautiful plan of what this is going to be, except I can't. So I have to be up here and be vague and say to you guys, trust us, we're working on something for this portion of the project, and until we can bring you a plan that is ready to go to Planning Commission, they just won't let us do it as they work through all their due diligence process. And so we did, instead of kind of waiting till the last minute, say February of next year, we thought, all right, I'll come back and talk to you guys and explain what's going on, maybe get some ideas or suggestions about how we move forward in trying to keep our PUD intact, keep construction moving, which it is, at the same time, trying to navigate some of these options that are coming about that could be very beneficial to the community, to this project, to this whole corridor. So we're looking at, in simple terms, just reducing the phase one so we could finish Cattleman's Loop, which is the road you see within the phase one that fronts the school and connects to Goggins. Now, one of the things I think is in our favor is that the school is under construction, but they wouldn't open the school for 2 more years, so in August of 25. And obviously, certainly anything that happens on our side would be done well before then, but there is a little bit of time before this thing has to be done in terms of a practical sense, not a PUD or the ordinance sense. So just trying to come to you guys kind of hat in hand to say, all right, this is the situation. We're still not entertaining any ideas of moving any of the uses around. I know that's been some discussion. We are still focused on putting commercial up here. We just need to follow the letter of the law. We've got to meet the requirements of this phase one construction schedule, which is supposed to be done by April of next year. So I'm open to ideas and suggestions and anything we can think of that could make it comfortable for you all for us to do this. But in general terms, I'm here to request a reduction of the phase one to what you see on the screen, which is the school property and the Cattleman's Loop connecting to Goggins Lane with the water quality basin, which again, you can go out there and see that it's already built. So that may have been confusing and roundabout, but please ask questions and I'll be happy to try to explain better if you have specific questions.
What would that do to the other road?
Well, and the other road that's going to Goggins in the future will be nothing. I mean, that road is still going to go there. We need both of those arteries connecting in through the development. And in fact, our new plan doesn't change that road at all. It's still there. It's just the connector road, Vermeer Way is the one that's in question as far as, we don't want to go in and build it, and then this developer say, well, we really don't like that there, let's rip it out and do something different. That's obviously our greatest fear. So in terms of our functionality of design, again, we don't want to change anything. But we need to put a pause on the construction of this section of road until we kind of get this project in a better position to present to you all as a real project for construction and approval. And so we would, again, entertain ideas about how that could be achieved. We just, at the end of the day, we just don't want to lose the ability to have our PUD development and, again, try to do all the things that we've said we're going to do for 2 years now.
That's the only question I got is that, to do that, how we know for sure that that road's gonna go back in there?
Well, that's a very, it's a good question. It's a worthy question.
That's the thing, we don't know
Sure.
if you put that road back in there or not.
Well, one option would be to put a bond on that, to say this section of road, because we've got a construction contract for it, I know how much it costs to build it, to say, we could put a bond in the name of the city and say, if nothing ever materializes ever again, then you guys have a bond to activate and build that road yourself with those funds. To me, that would be the only kind of straightforward, in my opinion, straightforward way of achieving that, so that you have a guarantee that that road is built. Obviously, that would be a worst-case scenario, but we would like to provide some assurance that it's going to happen, not just, hey, keep trusting us. Because the idea is before April of next year, we have a project bringing to you for approval that shows how all this connects. It's just we're against the clock.
Wouldn't it be possible for us to just deny phase 2 if it doesn't have the road?
Do what now?
Wouldn't we just
Sure.
deny phase 2 if it doesn't have the road that we want?
Right, because we would be, if we did that, we'd be bringing something different,
Sure.
which would then need your approval to do that
Right.
anyway.
So, yeah. So instead of doing a bond, we just
Oh,
say,
yeah.
no,
So-
you're.
Sure,
Yeah, we're
I
not
mean, say,
going
we're gonna do
accept
this,
it.
so the school has access, and it's,
Right.
again, if it was opening like today, obviously that'd be a different story, or even next year, that'd be in '24. But the fact that we have a couple years of their construction before anybody really uses this property for, a commercial purpose, or an educational or residential purpose, we're, again, sorry to be vague, but we're just trying to get through some due diligence on these potential developments.
So, in other words, if phase 2 is cut out, then you would jump from phase 2 to phase 3 for the multiple housing.
No, not at all. Phase 2 needs to happen because we need the second entrance to Goggins and we need the connection to Barnes Mill. Phase 2 is extremely important to the success of the greater project. Now, I think she was saying if we just change what phase 2 looks like and you guys think it doesn't work, then you could say, well, that doesn't kind of meet the spirit of what you had previously shown. Go back and do something, do it better. But no, certainly we're still planning on going from 1 to 2 to 3.
I don't know, what about that bond issue on that, Philip? Have we ever done anything like that?
Well, I'm not sure if we've done it or not and necessarily related to a PUD and the reasoning, but I do think it's a legitimate concern that what if the road, because what can happen, I'm not saying what will happen, hopefully it doesn't. But where this is a PUD, so the plan unit development, there's a timeline. Some timelines established where they have to build, for example, phase 1 and have the final plat within a certain time frame. If they fail to do that, then the planning commission has some recourse of just saying, okay, we rezone the remainder of the PUD to whatever you think's appropriate. But if they achieve that and meet that deadline, okay, then the clock stops. So for example, that they would potentially have the opportunity to never build any more in the PUD, okay? Or build 3 years from now if they wanted to do phase 2. So that is essentially the risk, for lack of a better term, for the city. Now, so if the concern is that the road does not get built, if that's the true risk, a mechanism or surety to ensure that that road is built would be using a bond. What we would need on that if we do that is a timeline. So we would need to be able to say, if this road, or you do not propose a new project in phase two within, I don't know, January of 2025, whatever, then that will be the deadline, and we will call on the bond, and we will, hopefully we don't build it, maybe that would encourage them to put the road in, would be the objective. And the reason why they need to do this is if they don't want to put the road in now because they have a potential buyer, which would then amend phase two. So they would have to come back with an amended phase two, and say, this is what phase two will look like now. So that would happen, and also they would meet the deadline. So if that would basically eliminate the ability to rezone it, to whatever zones you think are appropriate. My concern with it more than anything is related to the road, and it is that the school, if this road is not built, this connector, I'll call it, gives us another connection to Goggins, the school will have one way in and out.
Well, it's got a
So-
connection on Goggins.
I'm sorry?
It'll have the school has a direct connection to Goggins and Cattleman's Loop.
Yeah, for like a bus, like a small bus loop, right, in parking area?
It's got the front area. I'm just saying, there's not just the road, our road, they have a direct connection to Goggins.
Okay.
But your point's well taken.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the primary, we'll call it that,
There
the
you go.
primary road.
Well done.
So, and I'm not trying to shoot down what you're recommending as much as I'm just trying to explain the issues we may have if that road is not built. And that's the city's concern, administration concern. So if we have a mechanism that ensures that it will be built by a certain date that you think's appropriate, so be it. But I do think it should be, I said 2025, it should not be something that's out to 2025. It should be, if there's gonna be a buyer, I would think, what would you think a time frame is? You would know if they're actually purchasing the property.
Well, I mean, I'm working with the same customer, and we've got projects that are in multiple years. I mean, just for example, we designed the Menards in, 17 or 18, and this is just now getting built here in Richmond. So these large big box projects are just painfully slow. And they require so much of the cities and so much of their consultants that I honestly feel, I don't think January 25 is not I think that's a realistic. I mean, that's just next year. I mean, heck, we're already in August of 23, so it really gives us 24 to figure it out, and then by that time to say by the end of next year we got to come to you and say, all right, it fell through, we're going to build a road, or here we actually have something to show.
That's a very big concern to me, because you just figure the traffic with the buses and the parents and everything, traffic in and out, and you only got one main artery right there. That's because I know in some of the schools right now, they had to alter the traffic and make other provisions for them to get around. And that would be a whole lot on one artery just coming out there.
Yeah, and again, I know, I do encourage you to go out there and see it, because that is, over a third of a mile. It's a 4-lane boulevard. It's not a tiny street. It's a massive street. But again, if God forbid something happened and they got clogged up, then yeah, there could be issues. But I do want to make sure we all understand how significant that road is and what the road network will be. But again, to everyone's point, the goal is not to avoid this second entrance going in. The goal is to get there as soon as possible. However, we do have 2 years until a school bus actually does come on the property, which is, again, I think our saving grace in this whole thing is that we have time for them to build this thing.
Is it possible to go ahead and build the road from that road that we're talking about straight on into Barnes Mill?
I think it's certainly possible to go on and build the stub in.
Yeah.
Because that's our 100% intent is to build
Yeah,
those.
so why don't we
those 2
do
points.
that, and then you've got 2 entrances and exits, and it's one's off Barnes Mill, one's off Goggins.
And for the time being, just so you're clear, that would be stubbed just into the farm. But as soon as we can get across street from what is Cattleman's Loop to Farms Boulevard, that road it will go in as soon as possible. So I don't know if that's a compromise, so yeah, we'll have the stub in for 200 feet or 100 feet or something like that.
You understand what he's saying? I don't mean that directly. Do you understand what he means by stub in?
Not exactly.
It doesn't go anywhere.
It don't go anywhere.
Yeah. I think, and the other thing too, and I think some of this was before a few of you were on the board, Phase 2, the way it is designed, Phase 2 incorporates a connection to Barnes Mill. And that was one of the agreements we had, and this is primarily related to the school and some of the commercial traffic that hopefully occurs. I think what you have really before you tonight is the phase that's approved incorporates, I'm going to use my laser, I finally got an opportunity. So the approved phase now includes this road, which is a large road with basically a ability to turn around. It's not technically because all that's not going to connect, but you'll be able to turn around and come, and then it includes this road, which then goes down, yeah, thank you, includes this road and then goes down and connects. So this lot, which is technically in the PUD, is included, and then these are technically not in the PUD, but, so this lot, and the pond that you can see out there now, and the school would be in that Phase 1. Okay, that's what's approved. And so you have this connection and this road, okay? And this road. The request is to build this road and this pond. Okay, that'd be new Phase 1. And the school would be built, but that's separate. But that is the change that they're requesting. So in order to really ensure what is built out based on the current approved phasing, all right, just means, go back to the last picture if you would, please. Just means that this road and this connection has to be built, okay? That's what's approved now. So if you change it, the risk is this doesn't get built, or this is not built, excuse me, would not be built. So if we want to ensure that that's built, I do think the bond is quite frankly, the only way to ensure that happens. Because we wouldn't have the ability to basically just say, no, this Phase 2 we've already approved, that's all a no. You see what I'm saying? Like if they change it significantly, you would be able to do that. So if the developer, the owner is willing to place a bond to ensure that this road is built within, if maybe the answer is, maybe we nailed down an actual date of when the school's gonna open, and we say, okay, if you have not came back with a new proposed Phase 2 because of this new developer or purchaser that's gonna move the road back and put in a wonderful development, then the school's gonna open it October 2025, just throwing a date out, that if that's not happened, then we have a bond to ensure this is built. So if they won't go back and build it, we would have the ability to call that bond and do that. I actually think they would go back and build it if that happened, but well, I don't want to confuse everybody with the rest of it. So that's why we're talking about the bond, and I think that's a mechanism to do that. So the options before you tonight would be deny it, and they have to stick with the current phasing, which means you get the road now, essentially, or you can obviously just approve the request, which would then create an opportunity where the road may never be built. It probably will be, but that is a risk. Or 3, you can come up with some type of approval that requires the bond and with an expiration date of whatever. Does that make
Still,
sense?
that's not guaranteed that it get built, though, if you call the bond.
Run that by me one more time.
If you call the bond, it's still not saying that it would be built.
Well, the way it would work, and I don't think it would, and I hope it doesn't, but actually, we're gonna discuss something on the agenda about a bond that we're gonna talk about, requesting revoking. If the bondholder does not actually say, well, we'll just build it, we would have to call it, and where if it's a bond, we would end up building it.
Yeah, then you would get, say, $3 million, and now you have $3 million to build the road.
Yeah, and
So
then,
it would be built. I mean,
so we would bid it out
Bond would be
and
built.
have to go through the whole process.
With a bond, it'd be built. Not by them.
And the reason my concern, because I think when all this development come up, the roads was one of the most important things.
Sure.
In and out of that development right
Sure.
there.
Sure.
And for not that to be built, that just,
And that's why,
it just wouldn't.
understanding that'd be
sit
your all's
right.
primary concern, that's why we want to do this now, get ahead of it, and also understanding that no one can if the school would be the first user, we still do have this time to get this done. And again, worst case scenario, say everybody goes poof and it doesn't get done, then you call the bond and it gets built. So you have a promise that would be done in writing.
Just for my information, is the bond set up for just like a value now, or is it set up for a value 2 years from now, or just whatever the cost it would be to build the road?
Normally
Does
they
that
had a
work?
contingency in there of if it's, you
Correct.
do 110 or 125%, something like that, so you kind of have that built in there for fluctuations. And that's normally what we do on the other bonds, but that's about the only way to do that. And then I understand what you're saying. In 2 years, I guess, it could cost more to build that road, but that's how you do it.
Right.
Gotcha.
And that road's in phase 2, so that's why you don't want to go ahead and just build the road and be done with it?
Which road? I'm sorry? Well, that's what we're proposing, is to put into phase 2 for now. But the hope is that we come with you with a phase 2 project sooner than later.
Yeah, but there's very little, I mean, it's agricultural, it's public semi, it's water quality. I don't know, I'd just go ahead and build the road.
Well, the road is in the position of where this project wants to go.
Oh, okay.
So we would be showing you a new, like a revised road network between those two roads, and then showing you the new development between them, and how traffic would move back and forth, and how school would have 2 access points onto Goggins, or everyone would have 2 access points onto Goggins. So that's just where it's, again, I wish I could be more, have more information to provide you, I just can't at this point.
Any more questions? If not, I'll get a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the major amendment to the planned unit development known as the Farms at Barnes Mill to change the phasing plan on the stipulation that a bond is proposed that will cover the cost of building the road that we mentioned. And it has to be done by, I would say, January 2025.
So about the time the school would be needing it possibly. That's what we would-
By the time the school needed it in August, they'd have a leeway of
Yeah,
6 months.
that's my question is that the date of, because, then you'd have 6-8 months to build it. So that makes sense.
Well, you're getting to January 2025.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Then you have to.
That's your time.
Then you have till August of 25 and the school starts. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not talking to August 25, because then the school will be open, and they won't have any way out but one way.
No. I'm saying that if nothing happens until January, then you have, or we have, everyone has 6 months to build the road. Sorry.
Yeah, you'll have 6 months of
Yeah,
January.
I'm totally confused, I'm sorry.
You'll have 6 months.
I think we're saying the same thing.
You are.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, your intent is we would call the bond January 2025 if the road is not
Is that
built.
right? You call the bond, and then you'd start construction, or they would start construction,
Yeah.
one of the two.
That's what- yeah.
Otherwise, if you wait too long, what'll happen is it won't get done.
I think
second that.
it'll work.
Okay, so Dr. Short, you're the second?
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles, Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle.
No.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the preliminary plot approval for the carriage place.
It's been repaired, they don't have to do anything else.
Mr. Estelle, not to steal Mr. Worley's thunder, but the applicant has pulled Carriage Place.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Sorry.
Chairman. We'd take that off your agenda if it's all right with you. We'll come back. We're not quite ready to have you hear that tonight. And I'm here for the next one, so I came on up, but.
Okay, the next one, okay, for the final plat approval for the Arbor Woods Phase 3.
Wait a minute, so I noticed you're doing a lot of work out there. Are they supposed to be doing work before we got the plat?
Well,
Yes or no?
well, no.
I don't know what work's being done out there. I
Oh,
mean,
they're doing a lot of work
I
out
mean,
there.
there's-
I go by the 25, so why are they doing work out there? I know you probably don't know.
I wish I could answer you that. They had the preliminary plat up, and there were some issues that we need to continue to
Yeah.
resolve and work with the staff. That's all.
So they should cease work until the plat is,
Not my departments. I don't operate the machinery or make
No, but
decisions on that. So
you could file a court order to stop. We could.
you could, sir. Yes.
So Tyler?
I'll discuss it with codes.
Are we talking about Carriage Place?
Yes.
Yes. What we'll do, I'll send an inspector out tomorrow and we'll evaluate, and if they're disturbing over the 1 acre of land, we'll stop the work. Until they obtain a land disturbance permit with a erosion control plan.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Now, if, I think we can move to the next one. Did you say that already?
The Carriage Place,
So,
Bring this to?
Number 8, yes.
number 8. Yeah, that's what I was going to, number 8. Final plat approval for Arbor Woods Phase 3.
And so this is before your final plat approval. I believe most everything's in order. I think Philip has a couple of issues to discuss, and then there's a few things that Philip and I both just want to make sure that the commission's fully aware of as we move forward. And Philip, I don't know how you'd like to proceed, if you want
Sure, go
me
ahead.
to introduce some of it, if you want to.
No, go ahead.
So the two issues that we want to bring before you, I believe everything for this final plat is substantially ready to go, and with a couple of punch list items that Philip may want to bring up. But there's two things that we want to bring to your all's attention so that everybody fully knows, and I think it's still in the proper place for you all to approve the final plat. One, electric conduit is still in process being put into the facility. That's it's ongoing now, and will be done shortly. I mean, it could be weeks, it could be 30 days, but it should be done very fast. Bluegrass Energy has already signed off on this final plat and is comfortable with the plan moving forward. And to my understanding, that it's not their custom to even set terminals that you can connect the conduit to until you're at final grade, which would be down the road anyway. So we're proceeding along, in a fast manner. It's just that conduit is not finished yet. That's just a utility issue to bring to your attention since we're at final plat. The other issue, Jeff,
I think it won't be finished till November, isn't that right?
what's that?
Something won't be finished till November.
So you're already ahead of me. The other issue, and this is just entirely out of both the developer, the city, all of our hands, water meters. The utility company cannot get certain parts that are necessary to attach the water meters to the water. Now, the water itself, though, is already on the property. Everything has been done that is within the developer's control. But it will be November, we're told, until the utility company can get the meters, which the utility company provides. All by way of saying, so why are we ready now? Everything that's really in our control is ready, with the exception of we're controlling and in the process of the electric. The developer, there is a buyer that wants to buy all of the lots, and and without going into a lot of details that I can't, but and some I don't know, but there's a pretty hard timeline of the end of the month of September 1st for them to close on this. I think it's a tax-related issue. So we wanting to go ahead and get this final plat approved now so that those lots can be sold. And the buyer is not going to be coming back to Philip saying, well, I've bought lots that don't have water and sewer. They're aware of that. And they're aware that that's just something that is, electric, I'm sure, not as I said sewer, water and electric. Electric will be done, imminently and without anybody's, nobody control. As soon as we get the water will be there. So I think all the utility companies have signed off. Everybody's good with the plan. I think that your planning staff is good with the plan with a couple issues that, just punch list issues that we'd be happy to continue to work with on. So I think it's ready for you. Just want to be completely transparent that, so nobody comes back to you and say, you approved a final plat, but you can't put water meters on.
Philip, you happy with it?
Yeah, I think all that's accurate, and I believe we're fine with it. And to point out, I believe to reiterate what Mr. Worley said, but all the utility companies have signed off. So Richmond Utilities that provides the water has signed off. And I do think if we're comfortable that the purchaser, or that this is being purchased by one entity, and they know and are aware that water will not be available or the meters will not be available until November, then I don't think we run an issue there. But I do have somewhat of a concern if let's say the deal falls through, that then the lots are going to be offered to individual buyers. And then, so if I was a builder and I'm going to buy 3 lots and build, I would expect that they have water and sewer and all the utilities. So, but if we're comfortable that one purchaser is actually going to acquire the property and we have some type of surety that's happening, I think we're okay. Outside of that, there's just some minor punch list items that need to be addressed. So other than that, I think the development, and I think the electric will be finished within a week or so, is my understanding. They're literally working on it now. The water meter issue really concerns me more than anything. So what would happen if you had a builder, for example, they would have to, and they'll do this, I've seen them do it, but they would literally have to bring the water in to mix the mortar and concrete and things like that. So other than that, I think Mr. Worley's addressed all the concerns that we have.
If you had individual buyers, if you had a buyer, you had, individual buyers, I need to say, would the seller not have to disclose that that it's not complete?
I'm not sure. You may be able to answer that, or somebody better than I.
Certainly there'd be a representation in the final plat that utilities are available.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Bluegrass Association of Realtors contract, there's certain disclosures in there. They might pick it up, but if I were advising a client as a seller, I would say that's a material representation that would need to be made. I mean, I can't guarantee that would have to be made, but certainly if I was representing on the buyer side and that representation wasn't made, I would certainly that would be an issue to me. So, and that being said too, regardless of the buyer and the construction process, if it's made more difficult because of water not being there, at the end of the day, before this home can be occupied and sold to a final, a final homeowner, obviously that all has to be there to get certificates of occupancy and that sort of thing. So I think this is really, the water issue, I think, is just a carryover of COVID backlogs, and the parts finally run out that were available and they have to be made. And the electric issue, I can't speak to exactly but it's been a rainy construction season. I don't know what the delay was, but it's, as Philip said, it's almost done, so.
More questions from the commission?
Except there will be individual buyers because they'll have some of those houses built before November.
And at the stage that it would be sold to an individual, then likely that individual, through their closing process or their bank, would have a home inspection and part of their due diligence, and then they would find out whether the water or electric had been turned on.
I can help with that one. The individual buyers, I'm just talking about like the builders, individual lots. If it gets to the point, we would not issue COs, certificate of occupancies without water, for example. And there's a process to ensure they have passed plumbing inspection, for example. So, and we've done that in the past when we ran into some backlogged issues actually related to COVID, I believe, where that, yes, you can start construction, but we will not issue certificate of occupancy until the rest of the electric transformers, for example, are put in. So actual homeowner buying it, I'm not concerned about that. It's actually just the builders, for example, buying the lot.
Like you
'Cause
said,
they're
they
gonna
could
go out
haul
there
in
to-
water if he was mixing mortar.
Yeah.
If they were doing vinyl, they wouldn't need it, but I understand.
Yeah,
They could build it, just wait to hook it up. Yeah,
that's correct.
gotcha.
Any more questions?
And then I have I'm not sure which way we're going, but if a motion to approve, please add contingent upon administrative approval, and that way we can get the punch list items and things, just in a letter of credit checked off, kind of the minor stuff, and then we'll sign it.
Okay, might get a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve the final plat, approval for the Arbor Woods Phase 3 and 4 contingent on administration approval.
I'll second.
Okay.
Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles, Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is
Thank you very much.
thank you, revocation of the letter of credit for Derby Chase subdivision.
Okay, I doubt anyone's here for that, and this is actually a request on behalf of Codes and Planning. So, as you know, and we've talked about it quite a bit tonight, actually, about bonds and letters of credit, and that's what I was referring to with that last project that was just presented. Each project, there is a required letter of credit or a bond that is used to ensure that certain outstanding items that are not installed at the time a final plat is approved, that one day they will be installed. So if it's never built, there is that surety there that we can draw on that need be and finish out the project. So we actually have several outstanding developments that have been ongoing for years and years and years. So what we try to do is work with the developer, if they're available. Sometimes they become insolvent or something happens, but we try to work with the developer, say, here's your checklist, what we call a punch list, here's your checklist, you need to finish these items. Now also, before I get too ahead of myself, the surety, the bond or letter of credit, I believe it's 2 years from the final plat, they're supposed to finish everything out. Now, sometimes markets change, like they did in 2008, and that's why some of these have drug on forever, because we had several years where it was very hard and didn't make a lot of sense to build spec homes to sell. And we didn't want, to force the hand of certain developers to go put in a bunch of sidewalk when then they'd have to come back and tear it out to build the house and do some things. So anyway, this project we've reached out to several developers. We have had some communication with some of them and some agreements for them to finish out their developments. This one in particular, we've not received any replies, and we've sent out written communications with deadlines. And this project, if our memory is correct, I believe the final plat was roughly in 2006. Okay, so it's been a long time. And so what we request tonight is we have a punch list with some items. Most of this is not very severe, but it's stuff we just need to finish out. And we'd like to be able to, where we request approval to revoke that letter of credit. This one actually may be a bond, but to revoke it so we can then try to draw on that money and finish out the item.
And finish it up.
Yes, sir. And it's very possible, depending on the surety that was used, that there may actually not be money there. It's been so long, and but we'll deal with that. At least we'll know that. We can spend the money and finish it out.
Is the bond big enough to cover it?
I'm not sure. We haven't had it priced out, and depending on how much the work is, our procurement requirements, we may have to actually bid it, advertise it, bid it, and then award it like we would any other type of contract.
We just don't want the city to lose money on it, that's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in a situation if hopefully there's something to draw on and we can finish it, but if not, this is a good example of why we have to do a better job and I'm talking about administration, holding a developer, for example, to the timeline. And making sure that things are done so that we don't run into this situation, because that is what happens, and that's a good point. If we do not, the reason why those regulations are written the way they are is so that it doesn't cost the city money. So, like some of the projects we've talked about today or tonight, if there's not something ensuring that road is gonna be built and they don't build it, and then we run into big traffic problems, which has been concerns, the city may have to build that road. Or if there's large sections of sidewalks and things in developments that aren't finished, or streetlights, people expect those amenities, obviously, so.
If you go there and you find out there's not enough money, what are you gonna do?
Well,
You're $1 short, what are you gonna do?
Well, my intent would be to talk to city manager and then get his approval for the procurement, but then we would have someone go out and we'd probably have to hire somebody to go out, develop the estimate to complete the outstanding items, and then once we have that as our specifications, we would then take that document and use that to advertise and bid to obtain quotes to make the repairs. And
But I
then
want the city to get their money, so is Tyler gonna sue the contractor then?
Or can you put a lien on it?
Or lien some type? Yes.
Yeah,
I don't want them to get by with that.
yeah, I'll have to let him answer that one.
Well, it's very detailed, specific, whether it's an insolvent entity and things of this matter as far as going forward with a legal case. I've not analyzed the situation to tell you one way or the other.
But as this goes along, that's what we should do. I don't want the city
Yes.
to get stuck with that.
Oh, the city will explore every avenue, I assure you that.
Sad part is you have houses you can see already been built there. And they're having
Exactly.
to deal with it.
Are the lots maybe there, et cetera? What, do we have others like this? How many more do we have?
Yeah, there's a few. How many do you think we
How much?
have? He said 12 or 13 roughly developments out there and that'd be after past the 2-year deadline. Now, we do have several of those working with us now.
Why don't next meeting we get all those and go through them?
We can do it.
Find out what the bonds or line of credit is and go ahead and put liens on them or do what we gotta do, because these people are waiting for their places to be finished. And I don't wanna wait from 2007 if I was a homeowner, would you? Let's go ahead and make these builders do what they're supposed to do, and if they're not gonna do it, then we'll sue them, or we'll go ahead but we'll get it done for them. Okay, I mean, that's just good
Yeah,
business.
yeah, I agree. And we have that list. It's something we've been working on, and we
So next-
have sent them
So
notifications.
next meeting, let's go ahead and just go through them, and let's see what we can do, finish it up for these people.
Excellent. Will you make a note of that, Mr. Stone? Thank you.
Where is this located
This development, I believe, is located out Lexington Road, so it's kind of on the outskirts, on Lexington Road on the right, going away from the interstate. I don't know if that's north, south, east, or west, but it's that way.
But I think you need to finish it up, so that builders
agree.
can't do this anymore. They get these finished for these people, okay?
Any more questions?
I have a motion.
Yeah. I just found out if
You
anybody
can't
said
make a
anything was said.
I'll make a motion.
Making a motion on,
Okay, I recommend we approve the revocation and letter of credit for Derby Chase subdivision.
I'll second that.
Okay, Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles,
Yes.
Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle.
yes.
And I did not mean to leave off other business and director's report. That was
Yeah,
my
that was nice.
error. So,
Is any more business?
Director's report?
Director's report.
I have one important thing to report. I think I'm correct on this, but the nameplates have been designed and ordered and will be here, when you, we should have them next meeting. Unless we're held up with COVID again and they're back.
All you need is just a piece of cardboard, like people.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Smiley faces.
That may be what's been ordered, I'm not sure.
City's tax money on it.
Just go to Amazon.
also, I do have actually one thing of other business. Yeah, so the September meeting should be September 20th. I will be in training, some other people will be in training, so that will need to move to September 27th, 1 week later.
Okay.
But I'll send out reminders and things.
Be fine.
So, and we apologize for putting everybody on the spot. I hope that works, but
If that does indeed work out.
Mr. Stone's out and his backup that we have said she can't do it either, so unless you want me to do all of it, and that won't go well, so. But if we can make that change, and we would have to treat that as a special call meeting because it changes our regular schedule, so we'll advertise it and jump through all those hoops. We don't necessarily need to vote or anything, but, and we'll just I'll contact you and we'll call it as a special call meeting.
Is that
And
all?
other than that, I think that's it.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. All right, so everybody said.
Do we need to approve the minutes from, did we already do that? Oh, that was.
All in favor of the adjournment?
Yes.
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 Do you know where you're at?
Not a clue. Hey, I hit a golf ball last night and I forgot I'd hit it. Me, yeah.
That's it.